The afternoon sun blazed down on Birmingham's 2nd Avenue North, turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon of heat as rush-hour traffic crawled toward downtown. 23-year-old Keisha Williams sat hunched against the grimy window of the Route 19 city bus, her swollen belly pressed uncomfortably against the metal bar of the seat in front of her. 8 months pregnant, exhausted beyond measure, and carrying everything she owned in a faded backpack wedged between her feet, she watched the familiar streets pass by with hollow eyes that had long ago stopped seeing hope in the world around her. Keisha hadn't always been invisible. Just 7 months ago, she'd been working double shifts at the Dreamland BBQ on University Boulevard, her tips supplementing the modest salary that barely covered rent on a studio apartment in East Lake. She'd been taking online courses in nursing, dreaming of a better future of stability and purpose. Her boyfriend Terrell, the baby's father, had promised her the world until the pregnancy test came back positive. He'd disappeared the next day, blocking her number, moving back to Atlanta without a forwarding address, leaving her with nothing but a growing belly and a stack of unpaid bills. When her landlord discovered she was pregnant and unmarried, he'd found a convenient lease violation and evicted her within 3 weeks. Her mother had died of breast cancer 4 years earlier, leaving Keisha alone in a world that seemed designed to punish people for being vulnerable. The friends she'd made at the restaurant had offered sympathy but little practical help, everyone trapped in their own financial struggles. The shelters were full, their waiting lists stretching months ahead. The social services office had promised assistance that never materialized, lost in bureaucratic paperwork and impossible requirements. For the past 6 months, Keisha had been surviving on the streets of Birmingham, sleeping in the bus terminal when security wasn't looking, accepting meals from church outreach programs, panhandling outside grocery stores while strangers looked through her as if she were made of glass. Every dollar she scraped together went toward the baby: prenatal vitamins from the free clinic, a few pieces of second-hand baby clothes from thrift stores, a desperate attempt to save enough for at least one night in a motel when her water broke. The baby kicked against her ribs, a firm reminder of the life growing inside her despite impossible circumstances. Keisha placed her hand protectively over her stomach, whispering a silent prayer she wasn't sure anyone heard anymore. Today she'd managed to collect $17 from panhandling outside the Piggly Wiggly in Woodlawn, and she was riding the bus downtown to the public library, where she could charge her phone and maybe rest in the air conditioning for a few hours before security asked her to leave. The bus lurched to a stop at the intersection of 2nd Avenue and Richard Arrington Boulevard, caught in the typical afternoon gridlock that plagued downtown Birmingham. Keisha closed her eyes, letting the hum of the engine and the chatter of other passengers fade into white noise. She was so tired, bone-deep tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from months of sleeping with one eye open, always alert for danger, never truly resting. That's when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the urban symphony of honking horns and idling engines. A tremendous crash, the screech of metal tearing, the explosive hiss of air brakes failing. Keisha's eyes snapped open as the entire bus shook violently. Through the window, she watched in horror as a massive transport truck jackknifed across 4 lanes of traffic just 50 yards ahead, its trailer swinging sideways like a pendulum of destruction. Cars slammed into each other, in a domino effect of collisions, their horns creating a discordant chorus of panic. The truck's trailer tipped, seeming to move in slow motion as it rolled onto its side with a deafening crash that sent vibrations through the pavement. The impact split the specialized container mounted on the flatbed, metal screaming as bolts sheared and reinforced walls buckled inward. Keisha could see bold lettering on the side of the damaged container: Alabama Wildlife Transport Service, live animal, extreme caution. Smoke began to pour from the truck's engine, thick and black, rolling across the intersection like a malevolent fog. People were screaming now, drivers abandoning their vehicles, running in all directions. The bus driver was shouting into his radio, his voice tight with panic, trying to back up but trapped by the cars behind them. Keisha pressed her face against the window, her heart hammering, trying to understand what was happening through the chaos and smoke. Then she saw it emerge from the wreckage. At first, Keisha thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, that the heat and exhaustion had finally pushed her into hallucination. But as the smoke cleared for a moment, there was no mistaking the massive tawny shape that climbed out of the shattered transport container. A mountain lion, no, bigger than any mountain lion she'd seen in nature documentaries, stood on top of the overturned trailer, its powerful body silhouetted against the afternoon sky. The animal was clearly injured, favoring its right front leg, and its ears were pinned back against its skull in a display of fear and aggression that made Keisha's blood run cold. The big cat surveyed the chaos below with wild amber eyes, its tail lashing back and forth. Blood matted the fur on its shoulder, where something had struck it during the crash. For a moment, the entire intersection seemed to freeze, hundreds of people suddenly aware of the apex predator standing among them. Then the mountain lion threw back its head and roared, a sound so primal and terrifying that it seemed to reach into the oldest parts of Keisha's brain and activate every survival instinct evolution had programmed into her species. That roar shattered the frozen moment, and suddenly everyone was running, screaming, abandoning cars with engines still running, trampling over each other in their desperation to escape. The bus driver threw open the doors, shouting for everyone to get out and run. Passengers surged toward the exit in a panic, pushing, shoving. Keisha tried to move, but her pregnant body was slow, awkward. Someone's elbow caught her in the shoulder, spinning her sideways. She grabbed the metal pole to keep from falling, protecting her belly with her other arm as the crowd flowed past her like a river around a stone. By the time Keisha managed to stumble off the bus, most of the intersection had been abandoned. Car doors hung open, engines idling. A purse spilled across the pavement with its contents scattered like confetti. The smoke was thicker now, burning her throat, making her eyes water. She could hear sirens in the distance, but they sounded impossibly far away. The mountain lion had descended from the trailer and was prowling through the maze of abandoned vehicles, limping slightly, its head swinging from side to side as it searched for a way out of this confusing, frightening place it had been thrust into. Keisha knew she should run. Every rational thought screamed at her to follow the crowds, to put as much distance between herself and that predator as possible. But her pregnant body was slow, her feet swollen and aching, her back screaming in protest. She pressed herself against the side of the bus, trying to make herself small, invisible, hoping the animal would simply leave, would find its way out of the city and disappear into whatever wilderness Alabama still offered. That's when she noticed the black Mercedes SUV trapped in the middle of the intersection, surrounded by abandoned vehicles that had crashed into each other during the initial panic. The driver's side door was open, and a man was trying desperately to climb out, but his leg was trapped somehow, caught in the crumpled doorframe. He was maybe 31 or 32 years old, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than Keisha used to make in 6 months. His dark hair was immaculately styled despite the chaos, and even from this distance, she could see the Rolex on his wrist, catching the sunlight. The man was pulling frantically at his trapped leg, his face contorted with effort and fear. And the mountain lion, attracted by the movement, was turning its attention toward him, its body lowering into a predatory crouch that Keisha recognized from every nature documentary she'd ever seen. "Hey!" she heard him shout, his voice carrying across the smoke-filled intersection. "Someone help me, please, I'm stuck." His eyes scanned the abandoned street, searching desperately for anyone who might hear him. His gaze locked onto Keisha for a moment, and she saw the raw terror there, saw him register her pregnant belly, saw the hope in his eyes flicker and die as he realized she couldn't possibly help him. The mountain lion took a step closer to the Mercedes, its injured leg causing it to move with an uneven gait that somehow made it more menacing. The animal was scared, hurt, disoriented, which made it unpredictable and potentially more dangerous than it would be under normal circumstances. Keisha could see the muscles bunching under its tawny coat, could see how its focus had narrowed entirely onto the trapped man, who represented both a threat and possibly prey in the confused mind of a wounded predator. Every instinct told Keisha to stay hidden, to protect herself and her unborn child. She was homeless, 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and had nothing, absolutely nothing to gain from getting involved. This man in his expensive suit existed in a world so far removed from her own that they might as well be from different planets. He probably wouldn't even look at her twice if they passed on the street. Men like him had looked through her every day since she'd become homeless, their eyes sliding past as if poverty were contagious. But as Keisha watched the mountain lion creep closer to the Mercedes, watched the man's desperate struggles grow more frantic, something deep inside her refused to let her turn away. Maybe it was because she knew exactly what it felt like to be trapped, helpless, abandoned by a world that should have cared. Maybe it was because her mother had raised her to believe that human life had value regardless of circumstance. Or maybe it was simply that after months of being treated as invisible, she couldn't bear to become the kind of person who could watch someone die when she might be able to do something, anything, to prevent it. Keisha's hand moved to her belly, feeling the baby shift inside her. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "Your mama's about to do something really stupid." She looked around desperately for anything she could use. Her eyes landed on a construction site barrier a few feet away, the kind of metal signposts with reflective panels that highway workers used. It was heavy, but adrenaline was already flooding her system, making everything seem hyper-real and slightly surreal at the same time. Keisha grabbed the metal post with both hands, waddling forward as quickly as her pregnant body would allow. She could see the mountain lion bunching its haunches, preparing to spring at the trapped man. She had seconds, maybe less. "Hey!" Keisha shouted, her voice cracking with effort. "Hey, over here! Get away from him!" She began banging the metal post against the pavement, creating a loud clanging sound that echoed across the intersection. The mountain lion's head whipped toward her, its ears flattening dangerously. "Come on! Over here! Look at me!" The trapped man in the Mercedes stared at her in shock, his mouth falling open. "No! What are you doing? Run! Just run!" But Keisha didn't run. She couldn't explain why, couldn't rationalize it even to herself, but something deeper than logic had taken over. She kept moving forward, kept banging the metal post, kept making herself as loud and threatening as her pregnant body would allow. The mountain lion turned away from the Mercedes completely now, its full attention focused on this new, noisy threat. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Keisha and the mountain lion locked eyes. She could see the confusion and pain in those amber depths, could see this was an animal that wanted nothing more than to escape, to return to wherever it had come from. It didn't want to be here any more than she wanted to be confronting it. "It's okay," Keisha heard herself saying, her voice gentler now but still loud. "It's okay. You don't want to hurt anyone. You just want to go home. I get it. Trust me. I understand exactly how that feels." She kept the metal post raised, kept herself between the predator and the trapped man, even though every cell in her body screamed that this was madness. The sirens were louder now, emergency vehicles converging on the scene from multiple directions. The mountain lion's ears swiveled toward the new sounds, its body tense and coiled. For another heart-stopping moment, Keisha thought it might attack her anyway, might end this insane confrontation in the most predictable way possible. Then, as suddenly as the nightmare had begun, the mountain lion turned and bounded away, disappearing between two buildings toward the warren of alleys that led toward Railroad Park. Within seconds, it had vanished completely, leaving behind only the chaos of the crashed truck and abandoned vehicles. Keisha stood there shaking, the metal post slipping from her numb fingers and clattering to the pavement. Her legs felt like water, and she staggered sideways, catching herself against the hood of an abandoned Honda. Her whole body trembled violently, and she felt tears streaming down her face, though she couldn't remember starting to cry. "Oh my God," she heard the trapped man saying, his voice hoarse with shock. "Oh my God, you saved my life. You're pregnant and you... Why would you... You could have been killed." Emergency vehicles were pouring into the intersection now. Police cruisers, fire trucks, an ambulance, even an animal control van. Firefighters rushed toward the Mercedes with hydraulic tools to free the trapped man. Paramedics were checking people for injuries. The controlled chaos of professional emergency response replaced the panicked chaos of moments before. A paramedic, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, reached Keisha first. "Ma'am, are you hurt? The baby?" I think we're okay, Keisha managed, though her voice didn't sound like her own. I need to sit down. As the paramedic guided her toward the ambulance, Keisha caught one last glimpse of the man in the expensive suit. Firefighters were working to free his leg, and he was pointing in her direction, saying something urgent to anyone who would listen. Their eyes met across the smoky intersection, and Keisha saw something there she couldn't quite identify. Shock, gratitude, maybe something more. Then the paramedic was helping her onto a gurney, and the world tilted sideways as the adrenaline finally left her system and exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Keisha woke to the sterile smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of medical equipment. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. The ceiling above her was white acoustic tile, marked with water stains in one corner. Fluorescent lights hummed softly, creating a clinical glow that made everything feel slightly unreal. "Easy there," a gentle voice said from her left. "You're at UAB Hospital. You passed out at the scene. How are you feeling?" Keisha turned her head to see a nurse, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a neat bun, checking the monitors beside the bed. Her hand immediately went to her belly, panic flooding through her. "The baby is perfectly fine," the nurse assured her with a warm smile. "We've been monitoring both of you for the past 2 hours. Strong heartbeat, good movement. Your baby is a fighter, just like their mama. You're dehydrated and malnourished, and your blood pressure is elevated, but nothing we can't manage. We've got you on an IV with fluids and some nutrients." Relief washed over Keisha so intensely that tears sprang to her eyes. She hadn't realized how terrified she'd been until the fear released its grip on her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. The nurse patted her shoulder gently. "You did something incredibly brave today. Incredibly stupid too, if you don't mind me saying, but brave. That man you saved has been asking about you every 15 minutes since he got out of surgery." "Surgery?" Keisha asked, alarmed. "His leg was pretty badly crushed in the accident. They had to put in some pins and plates, but he'll be fine. He's in the recovery ward right now, probably driving the nurses there just as crazy as he's been driving us." The nurse grinned. "He's insisting on seeing you as soon as you're awake. Says he needs to thank you personally, but you don't have to see him if you don't want to. You need rest." Before Keisha could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway outside her room. She heard a man's voice, authoritative and insistent, and then the door opened. A tall, distinguished man in his early 60s entered, wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit that probably cost more than a used car. His silver hair was styled perfectly, and his dark eyes held a mixture of warmth and intensity that made Keisha instinctively sit up straighter in the bed. Behind him came another man, younger but clearly related. The same strong jawline, the same intelligent eyes, though his were currently shadowed with pain and medication. He was in a wheelchair, his right leg extended in front of him, encased in a surgical boot and bandages. Despite the hospital gown and obvious discomfort, there was something commanding about his presence. This was the man from the Mercedes, the man she'd saved. "Ms. Williams," the older man said, his voice rich and cultured, carrying the refined accent of old Alabama money. "I'm Marcus Whitmore, and this is my son, Daniel Whitmore. We've been waiting to meet you properly." Keisha felt suddenly painfully aware of her appearance, her worn t-shirt, her unwashed hair, the way she probably smelled after months on the streets. These men existed in a world of luxury and privilege, so far removed from her reality that they might as well be visiting from another planet. I don't need thanks," she said quietly. "I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," Daniel said, rolling his wheelchair closer to her bed. His voice was rough, probably from the anesthesia, but sincere. Everyone else ran. The entire intersection emptied out in about 90 seconds. You were the only person who stayed. The only person who put themselves in danger to help a complete stranger. He paused, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You were 8 months pregnant, and you charged at a mountain lion. Do you understand how insane that was?" "I wasn't really thinking," Keisha admitted. I couldn't watch you die." Marcus Whitmore pulled up a chair and sat down, studying her with an expression that Keisha couldn't quite read. "The police told us about your situation, that you've been unhoused for the past several months, that you've been surviving on the streets while pregnant." Shame burned hot in Keisha's cheeks. Of course they knew. Of course they'd checked. "I'm doing my best," she said defensively. "I'm not on drugs, I'm just trying to take care of my baby until I can figure things out." "I'm not judging you," Marcus said gently. "I'm trying to understand what kind of person risks everything, including their unborn child, to save a stranger when they have every reason to focus solely on their own survival. The doctor says you haven't been eating properly. Your vitamin levels are dangerously low. You should be focused on nothing but taking care of yourself and that baby. Instead, you faced down a mountain lion for my son." Keisha didn't know what to say to that. She looked down at her hands, at the IV taped to her arm, at the calluses on her palms from months of sleeping on concrete and carrying everything she owned in a backpack. "Miss Williams," Daniel said, and something in his tone made her look up. "My father and I would like to make you an offer. We own Whitmore Development Corporation. We're one of the largest real estate and commercial development companies in the Southeast. We have the resources to help you, and frankly, we owe you a debt that we can never truly repay. My life is worth more than money, certainly more than pride." "I don't want charity," Keisha said quickly, that old defensive instinct rising up. She'd learned the hard way that nothing came free, that help always had strings attached. "This isn't charity," Marcus interjected. "Consider it an employment opportunity. My son is expanding his role in the company, taking over several major development projects. He needs a personal assistant, someone he can trust implicitly, someone with the courage and character you demonstrated today, someone who makes decisions from the heart, not from self-interest." Keisha stared at them both, certain she'd misunderstood. "You want to hire me? I don't have any experience with that kind of work. I was a waitress. I have my GED and about 2 years of community college. I don't know anything about real estate or development or—" "You can learn," Daniel said simply. "Everything else is trainable. Character isn't. We're offering you a position, a salary, and housing. We have a guest house on our property in Mountain Brook. It's fully furnished, 2 bedrooms, completely private. You and your baby would have a safe place to live while you work for us. Full health insurance, of course, including full coverage for your delivery and the baby's care." The room seemed to tilt slightly. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like Keisha. "Why?" she finally managed. "Why would you do this?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "Because you saved my son's life when you had absolutely nothing to gain and everything to lose. Because I've spent 40 years in business, and I've learned that true character is the rarest commodity in the world. Because my wife passed away 3 years ago, and before she died, she made me promise that I would always help people who demonstrate true goodness, the kind of selfless courage that seems to be disappearing from the world." His voice softened. "Because no pregnant woman should be sleeping on the streets, and if I have the power to change that for you, then I have an obligation to do so." Keisha felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Daniel said simply. "Say yes and let us help you the way you helped me. Give us the chance to do something good, something that honors what you did today." "What if I'm terrible at the job?" Keisha asked, her voice small. "Then we'll find you a different job," Marcus said with a smile. "But somehow I don't think that's going to be a problem. Anyone who can face down a mountain lion while 8 months pregnant can probably handle scheduling meetings and managing calendars." The nurse who'd been standing quietly by the door cleared her throat. "For what it's worth, honey, I've worked at this hospital for 17 years, and I've never seen anyone turn down Marcus Whitmore's help and regret it. The Whitmore family has been doing good in this city for 3 generations. They're not trying to trap you. They're trying to give you a chance." Keisha looked at Daniel, really looked at him for the first time. Despite the pain medication and exhaustion, his eyes were clear and sincere. There was something else there too, something she couldn't quite name, a kind of recognition, as if he saw her as more than just a homeless woman, more than just someone to be pitied. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur that felt like stepping through a portal into someone else's life. The Whitmore family moved Keisha into the guest house the day she was discharged from the hospital. The small cottage sat at the back of their sprawling Mountain Brook estate, surrounded by oak trees and manicured gardens that looked like something from a magazine. It had soft carpets, a real kitchen with appliances that actually worked, a bathroom with water pressure and clean towels, and a bedroom with a bed so comfortable that Keisha cried the first night she slept in it. Marcus had insisted she take 2 weeks to rest and prepare for the baby before starting work. He'd arranged for a social worker to help her navigate the bureaucracy of getting her identification documents replaced, applying for WIC benefits, and setting up a bank account for her salary deposits. A local church had donated maternity clothes, baby furniture, and supplies. Keisha felt overwhelmed by the generosity, constantly expecting someone to appear and tell her there'd been a mistake, that she didn't deserve any of this. Daniel visited the guest house almost every day during those first 2 weeks, ostensibly to discuss the job, but really just to check on her. He was still recovering from his surgery, moving slowly with a cane, but he never complained. They'd sit in the small living room and he'd tell her about Whitmore Development Corporation, about the projects they were working on, about the rhythm of the office and the people she'd be working with. "Most of them are going to judge you," he said bluntly one afternoon. "They're going to wonder why my father and I hired someone with no experience, someone who was homeless 3 weeks ago. Some of them will assume you're sleeping with me to keep your job." Keisha flinched at that. "Maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe I should just—" "Don't," Daniel interrupted. "Don't let their small minds make you doubt yourself. You earned this position by being brave enough to risk your life for a stranger. That takes a kind of strength most people will never understand. If they have a problem with it, that's their issue, not yours." When Keisha finally started work at the Whitmore offices in downtown Birmingham's financial center, a gleaming glass tower on 5th Avenue, it was even more intimidating than she'd imagined. Women in designer suits and expensive jewelry clicked past on heels that cost more than Keisha used to make in a month. Men in custom-tailored clothing spoke in confident voices about million-dollar deals and development projects spanning multiple states. Daniel's office was on the 16th floor, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. Her desk sat in an adjoining smaller office with a new computer, a phone system that looked impossibly complicated, and stacks of files that Daniel promised to explain gradually. The first week was overwhelming. Daniel was patient, walking her through every task multiple times, never making her feel stupid when she had to ask the same question 3 or 4 times. How to answer the phone professionally, how to manage his calendar and schedule appointments, how to organize files and correspondence, how to interact with clients and contractors, how to use the computer programs that ran the office. Some of the other employees were kind, offering smiles and introductions. But Keisha couldn't miss the whispers that followed her through the break room, the way conversations stopped when she entered, the sidelong glances that carried judgment and curiosity in equal measure. The worst was Jonathan Carmichael, son of Richard Carmichael, Marcus Whitmore's longtime business partner in Carmichael and Whitmore Properties. Jonathan was 29, handsome in a polished way that Keisha instinctively distrusted, and he seemed to take personal offense to her presence in the office. It happened on her 3rd day, when Keisha was alone in the break room trying to figure out how the fancy coffee machine worked. Jonathan walked in, his expression souring the moment he saw her. "So you're the charity case everyone's talking about," he said without preamble. "The homeless girl Danny boy rescued like some kind of damsel in distress." Keisha felt her face heat. "I'm Daniel's assistant. I work here." "Right," Jonathan said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Because you're so qualified. What did you do before this? Panhandle? Let me guess, you saw an opportunity and played the hero, hoping the rich boy would swoop in and save you from your pathetic life." "It wasn't like that," Keisha said, her voice shaking with anger and humiliation. "I didn't plan any of it, I just—" "Saved his life, yeah, I heard the story," Jonathan interrupted. "Very convenient, very calculated. But let me tell you something, sweetheart. This office runs on competence and connections, not sob stories. You don't belong here. Everyone knows it. It's only a matter of time before you screw up badly enough that even Danny's gratitude won't protect you." He stepped closer, and Keisha instinctively backed up against the counter. "And when that happens, when they finally kick you back to whatever gutter you crawled out of, I'll make sure everyone remembers that I called it from the beginning. You're a liability, a distraction, and a waste of everyone's time." "Is there a problem here?" Daniel's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his expression dangerously cold, leaning on his cane but radiating authority that made Jonathan take an involuntary step back. "Just having a conversation," Jonathan said with false casualness. "No," Daniel said flatly. "You were harassing my assistant, I heard every word." He moved further into the room, his eyes never leaving Jonathan's face. "Let me make something absolutely clear. Keisha works for me because she demonstrated courage, integrity, and selflessness, under circumstances that would have broken most people. She earned this position. She doesn't owe you an explanation, and she certainly doesn't deserve your disrespect." "Daniel, I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Daniel interrupted. "And if I ever hear you speak to her like that again, if I ever see you make her uncomfortable in any way, I will have a very interesting conversation with your father about whether Carmichael and Whitmore Properties needs to continue as a partnership. Do I make myself clear?" Jonathan's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "Crystal," he bit out, before storming from the break room. Daniel turned to Keisha, his expression softening immediately. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Keisha said, though her hands were shaking. "You didn't have to do that. I can handle jerks like him." "I know you can," Daniel said gently, "but you shouldn't have to. Not here, not on my watch." He paused, studying her face. "This job is going to be hard enough without people like Jonathan making it harder. If anyone gives you trouble, you tell me immediately. Understood?" Keisha nodded, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through her chest. When was the last time someone had stood up for her like that? When was the last time anyone had made her feel like she mattered, like she deserved to be protected and valued? The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Keisha learned quickly, discovering she had a natural aptitude for organization and people management. She memorized the names of every client, every contractor, every employee Daniel worked with regularly. She anticipated his needs, kept his schedule running smoothly, handled problems before they reached his desk. Despite her lack of formal experience, she proved herself competent and reliable. Daniel noticed. Of course he noticed. He began trusting her with more responsibility, asking her opinion on scheduling conflicts and personnel issues, including her in meetings where she could learn about the business. They spent hours together each day, their professional relationship gradually deepening into something that felt like friendship. They'd share lunch in his office, Daniel telling stories about growing up in Birmingham, about his mother who'd passed away, about the pressure and privilege of being a Whitmore. Keisha found herself opening up too, talking about her mother, about her dreams of nursing school, about the baby that kicked stronger every day as her due date approached. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something warmer than professional courtesy, something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. But she told herself she was imagining it, that a man like Daniel Whitmore would never see a woman like her as anything more than a project, a charity case, someone to be helped but never truly seen as an equal. Still, as Keisha drove home to her little guest house each evening, as she prepared dinner in her kitchen and slept in her comfortable bed, as she felt her baby kick and knew they would be born safe and cared for, she couldn't help feeling like maybe, just maybe, her life had finally turned towards something resembling hope. Before we continue, I want to thank you for staying with Keisha's story. If you're finding this journey meaningful, please consider subscribing to our channel. We share stories of resilience, courage, and second chances every week. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone show extraordinary courage in an ordinary moment? What does it mean to truly see someone else's humanity, especially when they're invisible to the rest of the world? Share your reflections in the comments below. 3 months passed like chapters in a story Keisha never imagined she'd be living. Her daughter Amara, a name meaning grace that felt perfect for a baby born into such unexpected circumstances, arrived on a rainy November evening at UAB Hospital, with Daniel pacing the waiting room alongside Marcus, despite Keisha insisting they didn't need to be there. But they came anyway, and when the nurse finally let them in to meet the tiny 7-pound miracle wrapped in hospital blankets, Keisha saw tears in Daniel's eyes that matched her own. Motherhood transformed everything. The sleepless nights, the overwhelming love, the fierce protectiveness that made her understand why she'd been willing to face down a mountain lion. Amara became the center of her universe, and the Whitmores gave her the space and support to navigate those early weeks with a generosity that still made Keisha's throat tight with gratitude. Marcus had insisted she take 12 weeks of paid maternity leave, far more than legally required. The guest house became a cocoon of new motherhood, filled with late-night feedings and the sweet baby smell that made time feel both endless and fleeting. Daniel visited often, always with some excuse, bringing documents for her to review when she felt ready, delivering meals from Bottega or Chez Fonfon that he claimed were leftovers but were clearly ordered specifically for her, or simply stopping by to see how they were doing. He was gentle with Amara, holding her with surprising confidence for someone who'd never had children. Keisha would watch him rock her daughter, humming softly, and feel something dangerous blooming in her chest, something that went far beyond gratitude, beyond friendship, into territory she knew she shouldn't explore. Because men like Daniel Whitmore didn't fall for women like Keisha Williams. Not really. Not in ways that lasted beyond the novelty of being someone's savior and protector. She'd learned that lesson with Tyrell, learned that promises meant nothing when reality became complicated. But as January arrived and Keisha returned to work, bringing Amara to the office daycare that Whitmore Development provided for employees, she couldn't deny that something had shifted between her and Daniel. The way his face lit up when she walked into his office each morning, the way he found reasons to extend their working lunches, sharing stories and laughter that had nothing to do with business. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention, with an expression that made her heart race and her hands tremble. It was a Friday evening in late January when everything changed. Most of the office had already left for the weekend, but Daniel and Keisha were still working, finalizing documents for a major development project in Huntsville that had consumed weeks of preparation. The partnership between Whitmore Development and Carmichael Properties represented one of the largest commercial real estate deals in Alabama history, and Daniel had been living and breathing the details for months. "I think that's everything," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. "The contracts are ready for signing on Monday. My father and Richard Carmichael will finalize everything, and we'll break ground in March." "You should be proud," Keisha said, organizing the folders on his desk. "This project is incredible. The economic impact for Huntsville is going to be massive." "We," Daniel corrected gently. "We should be proud. You've been instrumental in keeping this whole thing organized and moving forward. I couldn't have done this without you, Keisha. You know that, right?" She felt her cheeks warm. "I was just doing my job." "No," Daniel said, standing up and moving around the desk to lean against it, closer to where she sat. "You've done so much more than that. You've transformed how this office runs. You've anticipated problems I didn't even know existed and solved them before they became crises. You've proven every single person who doubted you completely wrong." "Not everyone," Keisha said quietly, thinking of Jonathan Carmichael, who still made every interaction as uncomfortable as possible, though he was careful to never cross the line Daniel had drawn. "Jonathan's an ass," Daniel said bluntly. "And honestly, I've been meaning to talk to you about him. Something's been bothering me." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've noticed he's been spending a lot of time in his father's office lately, especially after hours. Have you noticed anything unusual? Any documents or conversations that seemed off?" Keisha thought back over the past few weeks. "Actually, yes. Last Tuesday I was working late, and I saw Jonathan in Richard's office around 8 p.m. He was going through files, photographing documents with his phone. When he saw me watching, he got really defensive, said it was family business and I should mind my own." Daniel's expression darkened. "What kind of documents?" I couldn't see clearly from the hallway, but they looked like the Huntsville project files, the blue folders your father uses for partnership agreements. That doesn't make sense, Daniel said slowly. Jonathan's not directly involved in the Huntsville project. He handles the residential properties, not commercial development. Why would he need to photograph those documents? He pulled out his phone, typing quickly. I'm calling my father. The conversation that followed was tense and brief. Marcus promised to look into it immediately, his voice tight with concern even through the speakerphone. After Daniel hung up, they sat in uncomfortable silence, the celebratory mood from moments earlier completely evaporated. I'm sure it's nothing, Keisha said, though her instincts told her otherwise. Maybe he was just curious about the project. Maybe, Daniel said, but he didn't sound convinced. Or maybe... He trailed off, his jaw tightening. Jonathan's been resentful about this partnership for months. He thinks his father gives my family too much control over major decisions. What if he's trying to sabotage the deal? Would he really do that? Sabotage his own father's company? If he thought it would prove a point, force a restructuring of power? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But we've worked too hard on this project to ignore warning signs. The investigation Marcus launched over the weekend confirmed Daniel's worst suspicions. Jonathan had been secretly meeting with competing developers, sharing proprietary information about the Huntsville project in exchange for a future position with their firm. He'd been slowly undermining the partnership for months, planting seeds of doubt with contractors and investors, hoping to see the deal collapse so he could swoop in with alternative financing through his new connections. The confrontation on Monday morning was explosive. Richard Carmichael was devastated by his son's betrayal. Marcus was coldly furious, and Jonathan was defensive and defiant, insisting he'd been trying to protect his family's interests from Whitmore overreach. By the end of the day, Jonathan had been fired, Carmichael and Whitmore Properties was in the process of dissolution, and the Huntsville project had been restructured as a purely Whitmore development venture. Keisha watched it all unfold with a mixture of vindication and sadness. Jonathan had been cruel to her, had made her life difficult at every opportunity, but seeing a family business destroyed and relationships shattered reminded her that everyone was fighting battles she couldn't fully understand. That evening, Daniel asked if she'd have dinner with him. Not a working dinner, not a casual lunch, a real dinner at Highlands Bar and Grill, one of Birmingham's most elegant restaurants. Keisha hesitated, knowing this crossed a line they'd been carefully avoiding, but something in his eyes made her say yes. She wore the nicest dress she owned, a simple navy blue sheath that she'd bought from a consignment store when she started working at Whitmore Development. Marcus insisted on babysitting Amara, waving away Keisha's protests with a gentle smile and the observation that he'd raised a son successfully and could certainly handle one baby for a few hours. The restaurant was beautiful, all warm lighting and intimate tables, the kind of place where conversations happened in low voices over exceptional food. Daniel ordered wine, and they talked about everything except work, about books and music, about childhood memories and dreams for the future, about the way life could change in a single moment of courage or kindness. I need to tell you something, Daniel said eventually, setting down his wine glass and meeting her eyes directly. And I've been trying to find the right time, the right words, but I don't think there is a perfect moment for this. Keisha's heart hammered against her ribs. Okay. When you saved my life last October, when you charged at that mountain lion despite being 8 months pregnant, despite having every reason to save yourself and run, something changed for me. Not just gratitude, though I'll be grateful until the day I die. Something deeper than that. He reached across the table, taking her hand gently. Getting to know you these past months, watching you rebuild your life, seeing your strength and grace and incredible capacity for love. Keisha, I've fallen for you. Completely. Hopelessly. I know the circumstances are complicated. I know people will judge and gossip. I know you might not feel the same way, but I couldn't go another day without telling you. Keisha stared at him, her throat tight with emotion. Daniel, I'm not from your world. I was homeless 5 months ago. I have a baby with another man. People already talk about me, already assume I'm using you for your money or your position. If this becomes something more, the judgment will get so much worse. I don't care what people think, Daniel said firmly. I care about you, I care about Amara. I care about building something real with someone who showed me what true courage looks like. He squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to answer right now. Take whatever time you need, but I needed you to know how I feel. Keisha felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she realized she was crying. I feel the same way, she whispered. I've been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was just gratitude or proximity, or the natural result of spending so much time together. But Daniel, I look at you, and I see someone who makes me want to believe in good things again. Someone who sees me, really sees me, not just as a charity case or a project, but as a person with value and strength and something to offer. Daniel stood up, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair, completely unconcerned with the elegant restaurant or the other diners, or anything except the woman in front of him. Then give us a chance. Let me prove that this is real, that what we have matters more than circumstances or other people's opinions. Keisha cupped his face with her hands, seeing in his eyes everything she'd been afraid to hope for. Okay, she breathed. Yes, let's see where this goes. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Keisha felt something settle into place deep in her chest. The feeling of finally coming home. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were challenges and obstacles, whispers and judgment from people who couldn't understand how a formerly homeless single mother and the heir to a development empire could possibly build something real together. But there was also joy, deep and transformative joy, as Keisha and Daniel navigated their relationship with honesty and courage. Marcus welcomed Keisha into the family with open arms, delighting in his role as grandfather to Amara, even though she wasn't his biological grandchild. He told Keisha that she reminded him of his late wife, not in appearance but in spirit, in that rare quality of seeing the best in people while maintaining her own strength and dignity. Keisha eventually enrolled in online nursing courses, pursuing the dream she'd put aside when life fell apart. Daniel encouraged her every step of the way, proud of her ambition, never suggesting she should be content with her current position. She continued working at Whitmore Development, now as Daniel's actual partner in every sense, learning the business while building toward her own future. And Amara grew, surrounded by love and security, never knowing the fear and uncertainty that had marked her mother's pregnancy. She would grow up hearing the story of how her mama faced down a mountain lion, how courage and compassion could change everything, how the worst moments of life could transform into unexpected blessings. One evening, as Keisha rocked Amara to sleep in the guest house that had become their home, Daniel appeared in the doorway with an envelope in his hand. "What's that?" Keisha asked softly. "The deed to this house," Daniel said, sitting beside them. "My father and I want you to have it. Not rent it, own it. This is your home, yours and Amara's, no matter what happens between us. You'll never be without a safe place to land again." Keisha looked at him through tears. "Daniel, that's too much." "I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you will. Because you've earned it 1,000 times over. Because you deserve security. Because Amara deserves to grow up somewhere stable. And because I love you both. And I want you to know that love isn't conditional on you staying in a relationship with me or working for my company or being anything other than exactly who you are." "I love you too," Keisha whispered, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I never thought I'd say that again, never thought I'd trust anyone enough. But you've shown me that good people exist, that second chances are real, that courage can change everything." As Daniel wrapped his arms around her and Amara as they sat together in the peaceful evening light, Keisha thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate fear of homelessness and pregnancy, through the chaos of a mountain lion and a traffic accident, to this moment of warmth and safety and love. She'd been invisible for so long, overlooked and dismissed by a world that didn't see her value, but she'd saved a life anyway, risked everything for a stranger, and that single act of courage had transformed both their worlds. Not because she expected anything in return, but because she'd refused to let fear and self-preservation be the only things that defined her choices. Life had taught Keisha that you could lose everything in a moment: family, home, security, hope. But it had also taught her that you could find everything again, that courage and compassion opened doors you never knew existed, that the worst circumstances could lead to the most beautiful transformations. And as she looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms, at the man who'd proven that love could be patient and generous and real, at the home they'd built together from impossible beginnings, Keisha understood something profound. We are not defined by our worst moments or our lowest points. We are defined by what we choose to do when the world expects us to give up, by the courage we find when we have every reason to hide, by the love we offer when we have nothing left to give but our own frightened hearts. That truth, hard-won and deeply earned, was worth more than any mansion or bank account. It was the foundation of everything that mattered. Thank you for journeying with Keisha, Daniel, and Amara through this story of courage, second chances, and transformative love. If this story touched your heart, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to our channel. We share stories every week about real people facing extraordinary challenges with grace and strength. I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone's act of courage changed everything? What does it mean to truly see another person's humanity when the world has made them invisible? How do we build lives of meaning after experiencing loss and hardship? Share your stories, your reflections, your own experiences of finding hope in unlikely places. Your voice matters, and this community is stronger when we share our journeys with each other. What did this story teach you about the power of compassion, the possibility of transformation, or the courage it takes to help a stranger? I'm reading every comment and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Until next time, remember, your circumstances don't define your character. Your courage does.